So we start off the presentation with the question, why do you think you send info and projects to the SHPO office? You can enter it into the chat just for participation's sake, but what is it that you think makes it necessary for you to send projects to be reviewed by the SHPO? Because what it is it's the National Historic Preservation Act of 1966. It was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson, as seen here. I would note that the NHPA is actually 1 year older than NEPA, which was passed in 1967. So we are 1 year older than NEPA. But we, as most older children, we sort of get overshadowed. The Section 106 specifically puts the responsibility for compliance with the federal law with the head of every federal agency. Therefore, it is the responsibility of the federal agency to comply with the law. And that head, like the top man at every agency, is the one that falls to. So it is the responsibility. They can delegate that within their agency, but ultimately that is their agency's responsibility, and so it can go as high as it needs to. So this is a basic outline of the Section 106 process. In this presentation, we will be calling out the 4 steps of the process, but this is the basic outline. And what this really shows you is that you initiate the process, you determine your undertaking and coordinate with other reviews. And there's a question then, does the undertaking have the potential to cause adverse effects or cause effects? If it's yes, you stay in the process, the 106 process. If it's not, then you have completed the process and you move on to identify historic properties. Are there historic properties present and affected? But it shows that with every step in the process might be the last step for you in the process, depending on what you find through working through that process. So when does 106 apply? Is there an undertaking? Remember that for the purposes of 106, an undertaking is a project, activity, or program that uses federal funding or requires a license or a permit or is on federal property that has the potential to affect historic properties. It is the responsibility of the federal agency to determine if the project has that potential. And it is, we want to stress here that 106 is triggered by the undertaking and not the presence of historic properties. So it's not that, well, we have this project that has the potential to affect historic properties, but there's no historic properties there, so therefore we don't have to do 106. That's not how the process works. It's the federal action plus the undertaking's potential to affect. That means that it is an undertaking, and that means it has to go through the Section 106 process. Switch. Now we went. Okay. So we have a little poll, or well, it'll show up as a poll in the above the chat or below the chat in here. I don't even show polling. So, poll coming. So I'm going to read through some of these undertakings, and there will be a poll popping up in the side for you to answer the question, do you think this is an undertaking? So the Sedalia Local Historical Society is getting a National Park Service grant to purchase new scanners to digitize historic records. Is that an undertaking? Number two, the Harry S. Truman Home National Historic Site plans to install a fire suppression system in the historic building. Number three, and I'm going to butcher this, the Patee House in St. Joe, Missouri, St. Joseph, receives a grant from the National Park Service to replace their existing roof. Would that count as an undertaking? HUD is funding landscape cleanup around an abandoned building. Does that count as a? And number five, MoDOT needs a 404 permit from the Corps, from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, to replace a bridge along Highway 70. And a telecommunications company proposes constructing a cell tower. So, number six. And so, is everybody done? Give you another minute before we okay. Yep. So we're closing the poll. It sounds so ruthless. I'm closing the poll. Pardon? I'm closing 10 seconds. So does anybody have any questions or want clarification on any of the questions? Because I do know I put a couple of stinkers in there.
Hey, Amy, if you could just kind of go through the answers that were submitted and go through each of them, and that would be awesome. Thank you.
So I'm going to go through the answers for each of the questions because I can't see actually the answers that were submitted.
I think Jeffrey can share the poll results, maybe.
We didn't try that.
There
we go. Okay, so number one, most of it. Overwhelmingly, yes, the answer is no. So yeah, that is not, you are correct. Number two, yes, that is very much an undertaking. Number three, yes, obviously, they're replacing the roof. Number four, yes. Four is a little bit of a stinker because the language is very vague. When people send us projects that say things like landscape cleanup or maintenance, general maintenance, we don't know what that means. So exactly what projects are included in there, we can't necessarily decide. So what they're going to be doing, this is why it's left to the federal agency. So if those activities are going to be undertakings or not. Number five, yes, very obviously. And number six, yes, you are all correct. Fantastic. On to the next slide. Do I still have control? Okay. So this is where we're going to talk about foreclosure. Foreclosure is one of those things that is very important, and everybody doing federal projects, applying for federal money, should understand, because it can jeopardize your federal funding. If an agency or someone applying to an agency, effectively, if they go ahead with their project and void any chance for the council or the SHPO to comment on the project prior to the undertaking being conducted. So if they just go ahead and do their project without sending it to SHPO or getting and thereby precluding the council, which is what the exact language is. Now, there's the big F and there's the little f when we're talking about foreclosures. Big F is when a federal agency goes ahead and they do their project without checking with anybody or with the SHPO. A small f is typically when a person applying for a permit, say they're applying for use permit from the Forest Service or something like that, and they go ahead and they do their project, the Forest Service still has to notify SHPO, and it's still, if the project has gone forward, our time for comment has passed. But that does not mean that it's a big foreclosure on the federal agency. It just means that they didn't get the chance to actually do their necessary 106 for that project because the applicant went ahead and did it. But what they do have to determine is if the applicant carried out something called anticipatory demolition. So if there's a foreclosure, they have to determine if they damaged or destroyed any historic properties. But they also have to determine if an applicant, knowing that they had a historic property, knowing that that property was there, or that they were going to damage it with their project, that they went ahead and did their project before applying for federal funding or their permit or whatever, to avoid having to comply with Section 106. That's called anticipatory demolition. They have gone ahead, they have demolished the property, anticipating the Section 106 process and wanting to avoid it, knowing that it was a historic property. So I have another little poll for you, quick one this time. There are three examples. One of them is a foreclosure, or they're either foreclosure or they're anticipatory demolition, or neither. I do give you the option for neither. So the owner of a building contributing to a historic district demolishes the building before applying for rural development funding. Number two, a contractor working on a MoDOT construction project puts a borrow site in a restricted area and uncovers artifacts. Is that foreclosure, anticipatory demolition, or neither? And number three, the Mark Twain National Forest installs a swimming pool at a campsite without consultation. Is that foreclosure, anticipatory demolition, or neither? So we'll give it, should be quick. There's only 3 questions.
Someone asked if you're saying that this report
Casey, so I'm wondering what you mean by a valid method. Anticipatory demolition is not valid. You can, if a federal agency determines that anticipatory demolition has taken place, it cannot, under the law, fund that project. It cannot permit that project. And thereby any actions that they can take because of that, is because of not getting your permit or federal funding. So no, it is not. Anticipatory demolition is foreclosure on a scale. Okay. Why is number 6 an undertaking? Number 6 is an undertaking because they're constructing an FCC tower, and therefore they need an FCC permit. So poll results. Number 1, what was the situation? Yes, it was anticipatory demolition. Number 2 is pretty well split, and actually no answer got the biggest amount. This was the neither. So basically, MoDOT lays out restricted areas when they do their projects through consultation with SHPO. So if a contractor went into one of those restricted areas, it would actually be an after the fact or unanticipated discovery. And then number 3, sorry, is yes. Number 3 is a foreclosure. I don't think March National Forest would put in a swimming pool, but they were the only ones I could think of. So yes, if a federal agency just goes ahead and does a project without consulting with anybody under Section 106, then it is a foreclosure situation. So thank you all. Watch now, don't skip ahead like 5 of them. Nope. There we go.